how it moves, for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Thank you, John Larson. I receive your kind words on behalf of all of our courageous members of the House of Representatives who want the best for the American people. And what we can do that is best for them in the next 24 hours is to pass affordable, accessible health care for all Americans. The best for all Americans is to have 32 million more people to have health insurance in our country. The best for...
Piece of stinking filth.
Shh, say it again, Shal. This is AJ of the InfoWars. Listen to the Shaliak. This is Alex Jones of InfoWars. Listen to Shaliak on the Cold Reality News and Report.
This is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Well, hello there.
Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Oh my God, I just had a revelation. I'm probing the deepest recesses of my unconscious. Wait a minute. Stacey?
Hey, Max. You know what? I'm glad to see that you have a little whiteboard here because we might need it because this whole episode is going to be, well, this first half of this episode is going to be about charts because the Wall Street Journal did a great, basically, assembly of charts to show where we are 10 years after the financial crisis hit. Remember the financial crisis of 2008? Well, 10 years later, 2018, these are some where we've come from since then. And first, they start with good times are back in the market. The government pumped trillions of dollars into the economy to stabilize the banking system. Bank stocks lagged behind the market, but got a boost after November 2016 when Donald Trump was elected president and promised to tear up crisis-era regulations. So this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average up there on the white, and these are the banking stocks, which kind of lagged for a while because everybody thought, well, you know, the Dodd-Frank was supposedly going to do something and all these sort of regulations that were brought in to keep them from defrauding the American people. But Donald Trump came in and the Republicans are promising to tear up everything.
Well, the number that they look at to determine whether or not they're succeeding as politicians is the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So if that's going up, they consider themselves to be succeeding. The underlying fault of this mechanism to distribute the wealth generated by the country is never considered. The fact that the wealth and income gap is spreading wildly toward third world status, infant mortality up, and healthcare bankrupting millions is not part of the equation. They simply look at the Dow Jones Index to determine.
Mortality rates are not only up for infants, but also for working age adults. So that is a shock. That is something that hasn't really happened in the U.S.
Right. The opiate drug makers are in the Dow Jones. So that goes up.
No, they're actually the biggest opioid is a family-owned private business, the one in Connecticut that makes Oxy and all those things. They're actually not in the Dow Jones.
Right. And all the ancillary businesses that support the heroin, synthetic heroin distribution. They distribute heroin instead of wealth. That's the American economy. I mean, back in Soviet days, they ran on vodka. In America today, it runs on synthetic heroin.
So we have two more charts here showing this inequality. The Wall Street Journal does show the two charts that establish that indeed there has been huge inequality. And remember, 2008 was when Obama came into office. He exited in 2016. So these are mostly his 10 years. This is what happened under Barack Obama. I remember a lot of the resistance media says that this was a great, great, great time. But as the actual data suggests, why the mortality rates increased so hugely that the World Health Organization sort of bodies say this is only happens in sort of like civil war or in epidemics that we see increases in mortality of the amount that has happened in the United States. Well, let's look at these next two charts. The first one, median household income is only up 5.3% since 2008. Employment has risen, but about a fifth of the U.S. jobs are in occupations where the median income is below the federal poverty line. And median household income is barely above its 2008 level, adjusting for inflation. So as we said, like most of the very wealthy receive more income from dividends and interest income and capital gains. So they're still on the lower income. The stock market is up 3, 4, 5 fold since 2008. That's where their income comes from. People working for a living, well, 20% of people in a job are being paid less than the federal poverty level.
How do you keep these people from revolting? Push the synthetic heroin, push the opiates. I mean, I don't think there's any coincidence that you've got wealth concentration unprecedented and even more extreme than the robber barons in a very docile population, and an explosion in synthetic heroin being pushed by the pharmaceutical industry and the medical insurance industry. There's no coincidence there. America's strung out. They're nodding out. They're dopers.
According to these charts from the Wall Street Journal, it would suggest that there is an epidemic of inequality, and in a complex system, one doesn't know how it's going to manifest itself.
Look, you've seen those videos in San Francisco in the BART, the public transport station, of people openly shooting smack right there in the public and defecating on themselves. And people look at that and say, that's the American economy succeeding. The stocks that push this are going up. Okay? And as I hate to be harsh, but let's be real. I'm going to say something that people say, oh, that's very harsh. But it's true. No, I'm not going to say it.
Okay. So we're going to move to the next chart from the Wall Street Journal, and this shows the income gap, the wealth and income gap, 2008 versus 2018. Inequality has grown. People at the bottom of the pay scale lost their jobs during the crisis. The government's response to the crisis helped inflate the value of assets like stocks and real estate, which are more often owned by the wealthy. So here you have a distribution of wealth by wealth percentile, 2007 versus 2016. So this is under Obama's watch, and the resistance wants us to return to this. They don't want to fix this. The resistance heroes, the Rachel Maddows of the world, want this to continue like this because she's at the top. She's earning a lot more. So in fact, the top 1% owned 33.7% of all wealth in the U.S. in 2007. Now they own 38.7%. So their real wealth has increased by over 10%. They're happy. Well, the rest, the next 9% owned 37.7%. In 2016, it's 38.5%, so a little bit better. But the bottom 90% owned 28.6% of U.S. wealth in 2007. 28.6%. Now it's 22.8%. That's down like almost 20%. So they've suffered a huge crushing defeat, the bottom 90%, under a system that Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, thinks was fantastic. They think that system was so freaking great. And who voted against this? Who voted against this? It can't be us. It can't be me, Rachel Maddow, and this system I love that has done so well for me. It must be some foreigners. It must be some Superman. It must be some uber freak from out of space.
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
They're trying to push the blame somewhere else instead of on the underlying system, which is statistically.
This is the data. These are the facts. This is coming from your own Federal Reserve. This is coming from your Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is coming from U.S. government data. It shows that the top 1% are over 10% better off. The bottom 90% are more than 20% worse off. So.
By design, by engineering, by financial engineering, it's called.
Occam's razor would suggest this is a reason people didn't want the continuation of the Obama regime. Remember, Hillary Clinton ran as a continuation of Obama, even though she was way further right than him. But she ran as a continuation of Obama, and people were like, well, I'd rather just blow the whole system up with an orangutan. I don't care.
Well, look, I mean, there is the fake left in the media space, like Rachel Maddow, but equally culpable are journalists, so-called, on the fake right, like John Stossel, who's a fake right-wing journalist who also doesn't focus on any of the realities that we are describing here. And, if on the old failed dictatorships, regimes of yesteryear, as the economies were failing, they would prop up bigger and bigger statues of their dictators. And so here in America, as the American economy is failing miserably, they're propping up their icons of these, S&P 500 or these few stocks that represent, the totemic, godsends that we should all worship before, even though they're being puffed up by free money from the Fed.
Well, exactly.
It's a Potemkin village, essentially.
Okay. Have you ever once seen Rachel Maddow leave New York City, leave Manhattan? No, she records there all the time. She hangs out with these people who have convinced themselves, because nobody likes to pretend that they've become wealthy in a rigged game, that they've been the beneficiaries of free money, because they believe they've internalized this notion that, well, it's just going to trickle down because I'm so benevolent. I tip the waiter quite well. I give 30-40% tips. I'm a good person, and this is just trickling down. So the next chart from Wall Street Journal. For the bailouts, many unhappy returns. The financial crisis cost the U.S. economy some $6 trillion to $14 trillion in lost output, and ended only after the government promised aid worth an estimated $12.6 trillion. Yet many were dissatisfied with aspects of the response, ranging from the price tag to the perceived choice of beneficiaries. You see how the Wall Street Journal, of course, has to, because they are the Wall Street Journal. They're not going to ever say, well, it's perceived that all the money went to Wall Street. It did, okay? Their losses were made up. The bottom 90%, they're clearly, as the previous chart shows, their losses, they had to eat their losses. They had to pound sand.
Right. Well, no time in history during a crisis like in 2008 where the creditors bailed out instead of the debtors. I mean, going back even to biblical times, it's the debtors that get bailed out, not the creditors. But because of the fascism, the neo-fascism, the Mussolini-like neo-fascism between bankers on Wall Street and the federal government fused together in a corporocratic daisy chain of incest and bile and financial shenanigans, the creditors were bailed out. And what do they do with all that bailed out money? They inflated the bubble even higher. So now I've got hitting the new all-time highs, but the morality and the ethics of the country and the wealth and income gap have nosedived. So you've got people in the street shooting up heroin, defecating on themselves, and like Janet Yellen, whoever's running the Fed these days, Jesse Powell, walking by and saying, that's an indication of our success. My kids are there shooting up heroin and defecating in the street, Jesse Powell will say, because I'm a hero in America. Thank you, Jesse Powell.
This last chart is going to show exactly and demonstrate the truth of what you've just said, because it says government-backed firms make up 96% of mortgage security issuance. So U.S. housing policy is frozen in time. When Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were bailed out in 2008, lawmakers promised a reset of U.S. housing finance. But 10 years later, next to nothing has changed. So government-backed firms, 96% of all mortgages are backed by the U.S. government, the taxpayer. And you know why? Remember the 2008 financial crisis. What was it caused by? Wall Street reaping huge amounts of fees and profits for themselves when they spun all these subprime mortgages into CDOs and other mortgage-backed securities, and they profited hugely. They all went bust. They got caught holding some of these dodgy products, and they got bailed out.
They themselves call them,
Yes, I know. Goldman Sachs famously in the testimony.
Right, so what do we do? I mean, what do we do when we have fake journalists on the left like Rachel Maddow, fake journalists on the right like John Stossel, and there's no coverage for Americans to understand?
You tune into Kaiser Report.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to be live in New York coming up.
Yeah, right down near Wall Street, actually.
Right.
Like right there next to Wall Street. We're going to be doing some live shows. We're going to do a few live shows next week in New York.
New York City. We'll be there and say stuff that, I don't even know what I'm going to say. Well, stay tuned for the second half. Much more coming your way. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to go to Chicago and talk with Mish Shedlock of MishTalk.com. Mish, welcome back.
A pleasure to be back on the show, Matt. How are you doing?
Oh, super. So, Mish, the latest jobs report
Either 164,000 jobs were added or 3,000 were. The unemployment rate allegedly fell to under 4%, the first time since 2000. Okay, what are your thoughts on the jobs report, Mish?
Well, we look at wage growth. Everyone keeps expecting wage growth, and people keep talking about the Phillips curve. You know, and I know the Phillips curve is dead, yet people just cannot give up on this idea. Wage growth is anemic. Last night I was up to like 3 o'clock in the morning. I put out a report. So, okay, Max, where are the jobs? Where are we creating these jobs? And what are they paying? Most of these jobs, except for professional and business services, are either stagnant or manufacturing has actually been declining since 2000, or actually been declining for decades. So I looked at two big groups, retail trade and leisure and hospitality. That's people working in bars and cheap restaurants and the like. That's where the wage growth has been, Max. And that's where the job growth has been. Wage growth, non-existent. Were it not for professional and business services, Max, the whole picture would be an absolute disaster. Mining, utilities, those are two of the big ones. No job growth in those, Max, none.
Right, so as labor productivity continues to rise, hourly compensation continues to fall, right? Talk about that a little bit.
Now, the BLS only comes out with these real wage reports every May. So, and it's for a year and a half ago. So we're going on 2 years old here now. But the last stats I had, Max, was that real wages, that's inflation-adjusted wages, are down in 7 out of the last 11 years. And people keep expecting millennials to go out and buy houses when home prices, which aren't even in the CPA, keep rising and rising and rising. Real wages are declining, and economists can't figure out why people aren't buying homes. Well, they can't afford them.
Presumably, it's dangerous to the stability of this consumer economy and political system, right? Is there a so-called cohesion risk, as the economist likes to call it, Mish?
Well, there's so many risks here, and I keep reading stupider and stupider things. Right before we came on, France came out and said, their budget director said he's looking to balance the budget. Well, you know, and I know, that ain't going to happen. However, the economic commentary on it was that it was insane. So I'm sitting here thinking, in this world of Keynesianism and MMT and free government spending and money grows on trees, we've now come to the point where allegedly it's insane to talk about balancing the budget. That's where we are, and yet despite this, what governments are doing in Japan, in Europe, in the United States, the CPI, at least as they measure it, of course they don't put asset prices in there, most definitely homes or the stock market, prices are barely rising. Again, if you believe them, and in a lot of ways I do, because they don't measure what's important. They don't measure the cost of education. Healthcare is underreported in the CPI, and home prices aren't in the CPI at all. So, of course, the way they measure it, they say that inflation is benign. It's really not, and millennials, the screwed generation, are really getting screwed on this.
I just say wages are either not keeping pace or declining. Rents, however, are surging. This has been going on for a while. Can you talk about this a little bit?
I follow a report on the Rent Cafe. They publish these stats. We're seeing the biggest year-over-year increases in rents in quite a while. Of course, it's all over the map. Now, I emailed them and asked them, I said, I wanted to know if this was weighted averages, and they said yes. Some cities are soaring. And, where is that? Of course, it's near where they refine oil. Some places in Texas were seeing rents up as much as 32% in a year. Wow. That's tied to oil. In other places, namely, New York City, where people are fleeing, actually. People are fleeing Illinois as well. So we're seeing declining rents. This is another one of the fallacies, though. that the BLS takes all of these things, puts them in a mixer, averages them out, and says, aha, this is what's happening. Well, CPI is really an individual thing. If you're going to college, your CPI is way higher. If you're paying for your own health care, your CPI is way higher. If you're on Medicare, I'm going to be on Medicare in September, Max. There's a plus and a minus to that. The minus, of course, is I'm getting old. The plus is I'm getting nearly free health care. All of that figures in, and they say, well, let's average this out. And with people getting older and older and going on Medicare, who's paying for this?
Do you deserve the Nobel Prize, you think?
Everyone thinks so, but I would never say it. You know what I want to do? I want to get it finished. The prize I want is victory for the world, not for even here. I want victory for the world, because that's what we're talking about. So that's the only prize I want.
Could something still scuttle this meeting?
Everything can be scuttled. Everything can be scuttled. Doesn't mean a lot of things can happen. A lot of good things can happen. A lot of bad things can happen. I believe that we have, both sides want to negotiate a deal. I think it's going to be a very successful deal. I think we have a really good shot at making it successful, but lots of things can happen. And, of course, you'll be the first to know about it if it does. But I think we have a really good chance to make a great deal for the world.
It's on the record.
Stop resisting!
And in many respects,
Stop resisting!
I'm not resisting.
Give me yours.
Understand?
Stop hurting him.
I'm trying to stand. My left arm is
Hold on. Stop fighting.
I'm pleased to say I can speak now to the man you just saw in that video footage. That's former CIA analyst Ray McGovern. Good to see you looking well and hopefully unharmed. We just saw the video of you being, it looked pretty aggressive, wrestled to the ground. A very unpleasant experience, I'm sure. But I have to say, you went in, you disrupted this official hearing. You must have been anticipating something along those lines in terms of you being escorted out.
Well, Neil, it's very interesting. This hearing started in a most unusual way with the chair saying this. And pardon, I can't wear my glasses very well because, as you can see, they're twisted out of shape. But what he said was this. This is an open hearing, and there'll be a closed section. Those people who want to say something extra, do it fast. Do it quickly, and then leave. Oh! So I noted that. I take copious notes wherever I go, especially at hearings like this, and I put it on the top here. I said, well, now, maybe this is an invitation to make a remark. I'll do it quickly, and then I'll go. Well, as you can see from the footage, I did it as quickly as I could, but then I was not permitted to go. I was assaulted, as you can see, by 4, then 5 Capitol Police. And the footage speaks to itself. So the hearing was in many respects a charade. The people running the hearing, especially Chairman Richard Burr, are known to be like this with the CIA. The first thing that Richard Burr did when he became chair in early 2015 was to recall all the copies of the 4-year study that committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, had made on the basis of CIA original documents about CIA torture. And it was gruesome. And that's why he wanted all the copies back. And that was a tip-off as to how close. These are not oversight committees. These are overlook committees. They're joined at the hip with the intelligence services.
Okay, Rick, I want to just show for our viewers a short clip of Gina Haspel from that hearing. Let's have a quick look and listen.
My moral compass is strong. I would not allow CIA to undertake activity that I thought was immoral, even if it was technically legal. I would absolutely not permit it.
So I suppose this is the crux of the matter. She denies undertaking any immoral actions. As I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't proof that she was involved in questionable activities. Why is it that you and there were other activists, and there are plenty of people who oppose Gina Haspel, why do they feel so strongly about she shouldn't be in this position?
Time out. I have to correct you. There is evidence that she directly supervised the waterboarding and other torture techniques of al-Nashiri, a detainee in Thailand. And that was actually what I picked up on when I approached the opportunity to speak. So it's not as though this is in the subjunctive mood. And that's what bothered me. Senator Wyden said, now, Ms. Haspel, were you in charge of the interrogation, the waterboarding of al-Nashiri in Thailand? Were you personally in charge? And she said, well, Senator, I appreciate the question, but we'll have to take that into closed session because it's secret. Now, who made that secret? Oh, it was Gina Haspel. So the prospect of Gina Haspel, the nominee, making incriminating evidence on Gina Haspel secret so that the American people couldn't see on TV that she was indeed the torturer-in-chief of al-Nashiri in Thailand, and make it go to the closed session, that was too much. And that's why I got up and I said that. I said, Senator Wyden is entitled to to an honest answer on that question. You know what it is. You have the documents. It is not really kosher. It is not really acceptable for you to refer that to closed session. You should really make that available, because even if she says torture was legal, it wasn't legal. There's not an authority in the world except for those faux lawyers, those false lawyers, Alberto Gonzalez and all those people who made the case that torture for the first time in history, at least since the Inquisition, was considered legal. It's not considered legal. And the reason torture is wrong is not because there are laws against it. Please understand, there are laws against it because it's just plain wrong, okay? Human beings don't do those kinds of things to other human beings.
This week on Cold Reality on this Sunday, May 13th. Elderly will be cared for by robots. More so-called positive developments in the North Korean issue. Stabbing rampage in Paris. Born in Chechnya, in radicalized database. Man found with huge cache of weapons in the Waikiki hospital. North Korea, as said, planned to destroy nuclear test site ahead of Trump's summit. record Mother's Day heat in Atlanta, Charlotte, Wichita. Federal tax cuts leave states in a bind. Donald Trump's neocon conversion was predictable. Army's new weapon, special goggles, allow soldiers to shoot around corners. Boston Dynamics is going to start selling its creepy robots in 2019. At least one dead, attacker killed in mass stabbing in central Paris. Bolton, Hansen, and the Color Revolution plan for Iran. Mexico, 91 politicians murdered leading up to general elections. NORAD confirms Russian strategic bombers intercepted off Alaskan coast. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. That and more on today's edition of Cold Reality Radio here on the UCY.TV Broadcasting Network. I want to do a quick conversion here. I'm going to get disconnected from the network, but I'm going to reconnect right after it. So bear with me. Should be less than a minute, hopefully less than 30 seconds.
Truth on the Track.